Everyone saw the headline and felt that jolt. Another explosive claim, another round of hot takes, another night where one family's life becomes primetime entertainment. But behind the noise sits a quieter question that actually matters. When a story this personal hits the feed, who controls it? Those living it, or the echo chamber built around them? A veteran author, Tom Bauer, spoke. The internet reacted, and the conversation shifted from public projects to intimacy and identity. That is where the stakes spike. When the subject is image, people shrug. When the subject is identity, people lean in. And when identity becomes a headline, the line between curiosity and intrusion blurs fast, turning every little detail into fuel for a debate that refuses to end. That is the brutal math of modern fame. The story is not just what you say, it is what people think you refuse to say. Every curated photo, every carefully shaped answer in an interview, every soft focus montage from a streaming special becomes evidence in the court of public opinion. If the image is steady, the audience relaxes. If the image stutters, they lean forward, pause, and replay. Bauer understands that rhythm. He times his words to the restless scrolling of the world, and the result is predictable. The crowd begins connecting dots that may or may not belong together, and the narrative takes off on its own without waiting for permission or context. Silence is tempting, especially when the claims feel invasive. Let it blow over. Do not dignify it. That used to work. Now the internet does not forget and does not sleep. Silence can read like strength, but it can also sound like a locked door in a house built on public trust. When the door stays locked, the crowd walks the perimeter. They pull old clips. They freeze frames. They build timelines. They ask why one thing was shared and another was not. They are not always fair, and they are not always kind, but they are relentless. And the longer the door stays shut, the louder the knocking becomes. Meanwhile, the palace keeps to its oldest habit: say nothing and let time do the heavy lifting. Institutions endure because institutions are patient. But the couple at the center built their modern story on presence, not distance, on explaining, narrating, and redefining tradition as they stepped away from it. That is why this moment feels like a stress test. Two systems are colliding: the slow, silent playbook of the crown and the fast, confessional energy of 21st century branding. When those gears grind, they throw sparks, and every spark becomes a headline long before anyone has a chance to add nuance. Look at how quickly the ripple spread. Morning shows asked polite questions. Night panels sharpened them. Commentators reframed the debate as transparency versus privacy, credibility versus intrusion. Supporters called the obsession unfair and dehumanizing. Critics argued that credibility is something you defend in daylight, not something you protect from behind glass. Floating above all of it was the same uneasy feeling. If you build a public narrative around healing and honesty, the bar for clarity rises with every interview, every photo, every carefully released moment. The higher that bar climbs, the harsher the response when people think you duck under it. But there is also a human temperature to all of this. People get tired, people get spooked. Anxiety does not care about brand guidelines. You can see strain in how often they appear, in how carefully words are chosen, in which topics get sidestepped. This wave did not question schedules or speeches. It brushed the edge of identity. That is why reaction online felt so charged. Identity is the last thread anyone wants strangers tugging. When that thread looks vulnerable, even the most polished posture can wobble. And wobble is exactly what the internet believes it is great at catching. So what would steadiness look like in a moment like this? Not a shouting match, not a barrage of legal language aimed at silencing chatter, because loud letters can sound like gasoline. Steadiness looks smaller, calmer, and more effective. It sounds like, here are the limits of what we will discuss, here is what we can clarify, and here is why. Not defensive, not triumphant, just human. When audiences feel that humans are speaking to humans, suspicion fades. They may not like every answer, but they will stop feeling managed, and stopping that feeling is half the battle in a controversy this loud. Creators can learn from this too. High retention storytelling is not about cranking the volume, it is about managing oxygen. Give just enough to keep curiosity moving forward, not sideways. Pace reveals. Use transitions that promise fresh information instead of recycling the same jolt. If a detail cannot be shared, say that plainly and move on without winks or bait. The audience respects confidence, not coyness. And if you ever have to choose, pick coherence over spectacle. Coherence wins the replay and sustains the channel long after one viral spike fades. There is a reason seasoned public figures answer tough questions in their own words, on their own channels, without cute edits. Long, clear sentences beat slippery slippery clever ones. Specifics beat slogans. Consistency beats volume. When those habits stack over time, they form a kind of narrative gravity. Claims float in, bounce off, and drift away because the core story is heavy enough to hold its shape. Without that gravity, every gust becomes a crisis and every critic becomes a conductor, whipping the moment into noise that drowns out whatever you hope to say next. None of this means the crowd gets to own a private life. Privacy is not a luxury, it is oxygen, but privacy without context can look like evasion, and context without humility can feel like spin. The sweet spot is a narrow lane. Acknowledge the noise, define the boundary, share the facts you can, and refuse to turn pain into content. That lane is quiet, which is why it works. Quiet is rare. Quiet feels like confidence. Quiet reads as truth even when truth has to be selective because real life includes limits. Think about the long game. 5 years from now, very few people will remember this week's panel debates. They will remember whether the central figures stayed consistent with the values they preach: service, care, honesty, and steadiness under pressure. If actions match slogans, time will do the housekeeping. If actions and slogans split, the internet will bookmark the gap and replay it forever. That is the real scoreboard in a controversy. It is not hours trending. It is the distance between words and choices, measured month after month until the gap closes or becomes the brand. Tom Bauer will write again, critics will critique again, supporters will defend again. The merry-go-round never stops. The only lever the people at the center truly control is tone and timing. Speak too soon and it looks rash. Speak too late and it looks strategic. Speak once, cleanly, with no hidden elbows, and it looks like leadership. Audiences may disagree, but they will not feel toyed with, and that alone lowers the temperature of a boiling conversation enough to let facts breathe. Here's the part nobody likes to admit. Most storms end not with a bang, but with a sentence that lands. A sentence simple enough to be quoted without distortion, kind enough to feel human, and firm enough to close the loop. No victory lap, no barbed aside, just a line that signals, "We are done feeding this." The moment that sentence appears, the algorithm looks elsewhere and the crowd follows. That is not magic. That is momentum being redirected with a steady hand and a refusal to turn a private ache into a public carnival. So yes, the claims were loud. Yes, the reactions were louder, but the deciding factor is not always the size of the spark. It is the skill of the firefighters. Steadiness can look boring on a day packed with hot takes, but it is how reputations survive. Choose clear words over clever ones. Choose boundaries over barricades. Choose presence over posture. Do that consistently and the story stops being a tug of war and returns to what it started as. Two people trying to build a life that makes sense under lights that never dim. In the end, attention always moves. The question is what shape it leaves behind. A dent, a scar, or a lesson. If a lesson is what remains, it will be this. Do not let the loudest voice decide your values. Do not let the speed of the feed set your pulse, and do not confuse privacy with secrecy. Privacy protects, secrecy provokes. When you know the difference and stand in it without flinching, storms do not vanish, but they do pass. And when they pass, what is left is the only thing that ever mattered. Credibility earned the slow way, one calm sentence at a time.